Hi guys, welcome. We're at it again. Week 9 of this NBA weekly recap. Yeah, 9 episodes deep right now. This is pretty good. It's released a day later because, it was Christmas this week. So, Merry Christmas to everyone out there. Hope you had a good week or whatever you did with family or friends. Mine was good. Name's Rencity. I have a weekly podcast called Sports and Shorts of Sorts. Check it out. It comes out every week. Didn't have enough room for NBA chatter, so that's how we got here. Let's talk NBA. Nothing but hoops. Let's dive right in it. We'll start with these team recaps. Start in the East, like the Sun does each morning. Start with the Atlantic. Still the best team in the Eastern Conference, best team in the league right now. I'm talking about the Boston Celtics. They went 3-0 this past week. Beat both LA teams on the West Coast. They thumped the Clippers by almost 40. And they beat the Lakers on Christmas Day. Then they would require a dogfight at home against the Pistons that required overtime to beat the struggling Pistons team. But other than that game, this team looks the real deal. Jason Tatum, I believe he's still in that MVP conversation. Jaylen Brown, Porzingis, they're both averaging over 20 points per game. The glue guy really has been Derek White, though. Many were worried. What would the Celtics do giving up Marcus Smart? He kind of held it together. Derek White, he's kind of filled that slot there. Clutch shots, just like in that game against the Pistons there. He's constantly giving that effort you need on a championship winning team. He's got Spurs DNA in him. We miss him in San Antonio, but like I said, this Celtics team, they're a real deal. They're legit, like, contender to come out of the Eastern Conference and go to the finals. So next up in the Atlantic is the current third seed in the Eastern Conference. I'm talking about the Philadelphia 76ers. They went 2-1 this past week. They knock off the Raptors in Philly when some in-game adjustments done by Nick Nurse kind of sparked the comeback, and the Raptors had no answer. Then they go to Miami on Christmas Day, and they'd lose that one. They'd have no Joel Embiid, who had the ankle injury, and they'd lose, like I said, to the Heat. Then they'd still be without Embiid in the following game in Orlando. But huge backcourt effort by Maxey and DeAnthony Melton was the big difference in giving the Sixers the win in Orlando. Paul Reed, he played really good against the Magic. And he's going to have to if Embiid's going to miss games. And they're obviously two different teams, with and without Embiid. With Embiid, this is a championship contending team, I think. Without him, they can do what they can, like against the Magic, but it's not sustainable in the long run. They got to get him back. Hopefully, it's nothing big with that ankle injury, but you never know with an ankle. But if Paul Reed does what he does against the Magic, they can ride it out a little longer. Next up, New York Knicks. They went 1-2 this week. They get blown out at home by the Milwaukee Bucks, but then they'd go have a rematch at home at Madison Square Garden, and they beat the Bucks on Christmas Day. They'd go into Oklahoma City and lose a tough one to the Thunder. That's a good, tough Thunder team. Jalen Brunson, he's been the consistent leader of this team all season. Julius Randle's been that great second fiddle. So this team's always in games. It's just, I hate to call him out again. I feel like I'm calling him out every episode, but RJ Barrett, man, I just don't know. His scoring's dropped the last few years. He's at 18.2 now, and I know he's playing a few less minutes a game, but I could see his minutes dropping even more. Emmanuel quickly has been consistently getting better off the bench here, and he's going to be eating more in the RJ Barrett's time. I know Barrett's the better defender, but yeah, he's got to step up, I believe, a little more. And they're still thin up front with Mitchell Robinson having that injury. He's out for the year. Jericho Sims is still out, and Isaiah Hartenstein, he's doing what he can in there, but it's tough, They have Taj Gibson playing, and he had to call to the bench to get pulled out. He was winded, This isn't Taj Gibson of 10 years ago, but yeah, they need some help up front. Otherwise, they got to rely on the young or the small guys. And you heard Becky Hammond say you can't win if you're one guy, your 1A guy is a little guy. Only Steph Curry's done it. I think she forgot about Isaiah Thomas on those Pistons teams. He did it as well. But usually you need a bigger guy to be your leader. But I don't know. I like Jalen Brunson. Well, we'll see what's up. I like Becky Hammond too. Former assistant coach of the Spurs doing her thing with the Aces in the WNBA. But we'll see what happens there. We'll stay in New York. We'll go to Brooklyn. Nets went 2-2 this week. They'd lose a close one at home to the defending champ Nuggets, and then they'd win two in a row over the Pistons. I mean, it's not saying much, but they'd return home just to get blown out by the Milwaukee Bucks. But that was a strange one against the Bucks, as a lot of the players were seated for rest, and they didn't even play. And then a lot of the starters only played 14, 13 minutes. Like when I was going through the box score after, I was like, what happened here? It's like they threw the fucking game, but they rested their players. Mikal Bridges spoke out against it, which I'm all about. Like, you got to win each game. You want to take these serious, and you're just going to give away a game. I know it was the second night of a back-to-back, and the analytics with injuries and what you not, but yeah, I don't know. You don't just want to throw away an NBA game, but especially if you paid money to go to that, and you're like, dude, WTF, bro. But yeah, like most things in life, consistency is the toughest thing to do, and that seems to be it with the Nets. Some nights they can take you down, other nights it's like, who are these guys, right? But we'll wrap up the Atlantic with the Toronto Raptors. They went 1-2 this past week, losing to Philly and Nick Nurse, which I alluded to earlier. And then they hosted the Jazz just before Christmas, and they were up big in that one, and they completely collapsed in the fourth and lost it. After the game, Coach Darko Rajakovic was getting asked about rotation and like, maybe you should try them. Have you looked at your bench more? And he's like, we don't have Steph Curry on the bench, and it's not like he's on the bench and I'm not playing him. We don't have him on our bench. Just like calling out the team's bench and Masai for building the team. But we'll see. Sometimes calling people out works. I mean, they go into Washington and win the next game, but beating the Wizards isn't the biggest thing nowadays. But that would end their 3-game losing streak. We'll see what happens with them. They have the Pistons playing them next, so we'll see what happens in that game. But you don't know what you're getting from these guys. Like the Nets, any given night, what's going to happen? Scotty Barnes appears to be the guy right now. He's a lot more ball handling it in the clutch. Pascal Siakam still doing his thing. Has some drop offs, but he's still showing he can be a go-to kind of player. Just like I kind of shouted out RJ in a negative way with the Knicks, OG Anunoby, he had a good game against the Wizards. That scoring output, hopefully that, helps a bit. And he's still doing his thing on the defensive end, but I don't know. He just seems he's always kind of an even keel guy, but I don't know. He just doesn't seem up to what he's capable of, and that's hurting the Raptors on the court, and it's going to hurt the Raptors, if they want to move him because his stock's kind of dropping with his play. So I don't know. We'll see what the Raptors do. It's like rolling the dice each night. You don't know what you're going to get with them. But we'll leave the Atlantic. We'll go to the Central, the number 2 seed in the East right now, the Milwaukee Bucks. They went 3-1 this past week, winning a tough one in Orlando before playing 2 straight at Madison Square Garden in New York. They thumped the Knicks in the first game, but the Knicks would get their revenge on Christmas Day. And the Bucks would stay in New York and beat up on Brooklyn, who weren't playing their starters, which I just alluded to. But yeah, this Bucks team, they look like they can challenge the Celtics or Sixers for best in the East. They're still figuring it out with Dame, and they've had Middleton come back when he did. They're all just getting the pieces together, but when they click, it's something to watch. Pick and roll, Dame and Giannis. You got Middleton and Splash Mountain spotting up. The offense is deadly. The defense still needs to get up where it needs to, but sky's the limit for this team, and I'm glad I picked them preseason to win the title. I'm still behind that. But next in the Central, Cleveland Cavaliers, they went 2-1 this past week, which is pretty impressive. They've been without their starting backcourt. Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland have been out. Big man Evan Mobley, and they still went 2-1. They get beaten up on the Pelicans, but then they go on the road and beat Chicago, and then go into Dallas. They're down 20 in that game. They'd come back to beat the Mavericks. Jarrett Big Fro Allen was sick. 24 points, 23 boards with 6 dishes. Yeah, he's a good passer too. Underrated passer, Jarrett Allen. But this team's scrappy and they're deep. They're showing off the depth right now with all these people missing. But they can only keep this going for a while, I think, because you need a good starting backcourt. I mean, Max Strus is doing his thing. Karis LeVert is helping out. But you need Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland back. So I think they can hold this and right the ship, keep it right until those All-Stars come back. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Next up in that division's the Pacers. They went 2-2 this past week, losing to Ja and the Grizzlies before going home and losing to the Magic. Then on Boxing Day, the Pacers would go into Houston and win a tough one there. And they'd follow that up by going into Chicago and beating up on that Bulls team who's playing better of late. This is still one of the most exciting teams to watch in the league. They continue to light it up offensively. Their defense has looked a little better, but it needs a lot of work. They just need to keep that up. Halliburton continues to be the leader on this team, and he showed why in that Bulls game. 21 points, 20 assists. You got to love these 2020s coming out this past week. The Pacers continue to have 8 guys averaging double figures, and it still seems like there's no reliable second option though. Like Miles Turner's second in scoring on the team, but it's a rotating door, and it's nice to keep the opposition on the toes. Like, man, they got a lot of scorers, but when you just crunch on Halliburton, who's going to step up and take over? Like Miles Turner seems like that guy, and he can do it, but we'll see as the season goes along. Because Halliburton, he's going to keep getting trapped, and in those clutch moments when he makes his moves, when they won't let him, who's going to step up, right? Maybe Benedict Mathurin. Who knows? He was my pick for most improved player. That's not looking too good. It's from the beginning of the year. But hey, my Bucks pick's looking okay so far. But we'll go from Indiana to the Windy City. Chicago Bulls went 2-2 this past week. Both losses were in the division, while both wins came outside. The Bulls would beat the Spurs in a game at home. Then they'd host the Cavs and lose. Then they'd stay at home, host the Hawks, and some clutch DeMar DeRozan moves in that way. And you should check that out. His footwork, he was shaking people off. Like, oh, it was amazing to watch because you don't see a lot of mid-range game, and he was doing it in clutch moments. Sometimes it backfires, but when DeMar's feeling it in ISO, it's pretty fun to watch. And in that game, Andre Drummond, he started for Nikola Vucevic, who was out of the game, and yeah, he'd go nuts. He put up 24 points and 25 boards, another 20-20 game. And then the Bulls would host the Pacers, and they drop that game. And as I alluded to in the Pacers portion, I guess. But this team continues to look pretty good without Zach LaVine. Kobe White, he's continuing his great play. We're seeing even a little more Patrick Williams, that high draft pick, see what he can do. Still don't think he's worth that money he was asking before the season. But hey, at least he's getting time to show it. And I don't know. I think these Bulls can sneak into the playoffs the way they're going now. They can keep moving up. They're currently in that last play-in spot, but they got some tough games coming up here. 2 straight against the Sixers, followed by a game against the Knicks. Depending on if Embiid plays or not, this could really be a barometer for how the Bulls are. But now, I don't want to go here, but we're going to the basement of the Central and the basement of the NBA. Dun dun dun. The Detroit Pistons, man, they went 0-4, obviously, as they're making history here. They hosted a Jazz team that was missing tons of players, and we're like, this is the best chance to break this losing streak. But late game turnovers, bad execution cost them. They'd had back-to-back game against the Nets. They were in both of those games for a while, but again, in the clutch, that's fucking up, so they lost those. First one to the Nets, after that first loss to the Nets, the Pistons tied the record for the longest losing streak in one season, which they then proceeded to break in their next loss to the Nets. Then the Pistons went into Boston, a game in which ESPN's Kendrick Perkins, you all know Perk, he said he had a better chance of having breakfast with Oprah in the morning. And the Pistons they looked like they were making reservations for him. They were up 19 going into halftime. But then the Celtics would outscore the Pistons by 19 in the third quarter. And then Jason Tatum late would go up for a shot and would get goaltended with 8 seconds left. So they're up 2, and you're like, oh, Pistons are losing again. And then Cade Cunningham would get the ball, throw up a brick. But hey, at least Bojan Bogdanovic was there. You tip it in, force OT, but in OT, those Detroit mistakes, they're trying to stay in it. And you'd have Cunningham spinning to the middle, losing it in traffic. Celtics score. They were just cashing in on those costly turnovers, and another Pistons loss. Now they've tied the record for the longest streak in NBA history. And then they're extending the current losing streak in one season. They've now tied 28, which is what trust the process, Philadelphia 76ers did the end of the 2014-15 season into the following season. They lost 28 in a row over 2 seasons. And now this Pistons team has done it in one season. You hate seeing records like this. I guess Cade Cunningham, it's been reported he went and talked to the team president, questioning how the team's running and what are we doing. He's been doing all he can for this team. I don't think you can really fault Cade on this, but I mean, that turnover in overtime was pretty costly, but without him, they're not even there, right? But fuck, they play the Raptors this Saturday at home against the Toronto Raptors, so hopefully they get their 3rd win of the season and break this wretched record. They'll be tied then. They'll stay tied. Staying tied with a bad record like this is probably the better thing, because if they lose, you're at Mambo number 29, lost in a row. Nobody wants that record to himself. Dwayne Casey in the front office, he probably wants to beat the Raptors anyway. This is probably extra motivation. I hope they do. Usually I kind of root for the Raptors here and there, but I want Detroit to ruin the streak. So we'll leave the Central. We'll go to the final Eastern Division, the Southeast. We'll start with the Miami Heat. That's right. Orlando has lived at the top of this division, but it's Miami's for now. Heat went 3-0 this past week, and they're up to fourth in the Eastern Conference. They beat the Hawks after beating the 76ers at home on Christmas Day. Embiid, like I said, didn't play in that one, and Jimmy Butler missed it. Then the Heat went in the Golden State and beat the Warriors. Still without Jimmy Butler. He wasn't in those games there. And like I know Butler's not going at the moment, but Tyler Hero, man, is he doing his thing. He's lighting it up for the Heat. Bam Adebayo, he's been doing his stuff since he's returned to the lineup. The Heat, like I know everyone uses that next man up mentality, especially in football, but I think no one does it better than the Heat. Whether it's their culture, whatever, their guys are ready to come in and play. No matter. You have to like who am I looking at? You have to Google the guy because you don't know who he is sometimes. But this is what Miami does. They bring them in. They get the guys that want to play and that want to play their way and put them out there. Duncan Robinson, he's been having a great year as of late. But the most impressive to me, I've talked about him a lot, Yami Yakas Jr., right? No Jimmy Butler on Christmas, no problem. Yakas Jr. had his career best, 31 points, 10 boards. Like, if there was no Chet Holmgren or Wembanyama this year, we'd have an easy Rookie of the Year. Yamayakez. He's still up there. He's in with those three guys. I think they're just so much higher up, and the roles are different across those three. But, man, this guy plays big minutes for a team that wants to get back to the finals. So, this Heat team just keeps trudging along. No excuses. Got to respect that, at least. And next up in that division, I mentioned the Orlando Magic. They went 2-2 this past week, losing a close one in Milwaukee to the Bucks, but they continue their road stand, winning in Indiana and Washington before returning home and losing to the Embiid-less 76ers team. That one hurt a bit as they figured they'd take that one without the big man, but that game against Sixers was kind of an anomaly. The Magic had 3 players score 19 or more, and they got nothing from anybody else. This team, I've always talked about this two-headed beast of Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero. And like this team showed it as depth at different time, but we need that consistent scoring. Cole Anthony and Jalen Suggs, they seem to be sharing it here and there, but I'd like to see Markelle Fultz come back. It's said he could be coming back soon. It's been slow coming. He's only played 5 games this year, but I think with him running the team, I feel like the sky or who knows where their limit is. All I'm saying is that's what Markelle Fultz can do when he's healthy. I know it hasn't been much, but I'd like to see him back out there. They do have Wendell Carter Jr. back. He's returned from injury, so we'll see if the Magic can find their groove from, where they were earlier in the season. We're going to leave Florida past the Georgia line, go to the Atlanta Hawks. They struggled this past week, going 0-3, losing to Miami before losing the Jaw and the Grizz the very next night. Then on Boxing Day, they'd go to Chicago and lose to the Bulls. At least in that Bulls loss, Jalen Johnson returned to the lineup from his wrist injury. That'll help. He was really playing well before getting hurt. And Trae Young's putting up his numbers, and he's getting some help from DeJounte Murray and Bogdan Bogdanovic, but the defense side still continues to stink. They're 4th from the bottom in defensive rating. Like, they still need to get better back there. I don't know how they're going to improve that, and they need to switch something up or maybe get some schemes, personnel. I don't know how they're going to do that. That's a tough task that I guess Quinn Snyder's got to figure out as head coach. Next up, Charlotte Hornets. They had a rough go, 0-3 this past week. They were in a close one against the Nuggets, dropping that though. They would then have a lead against LA and against the Clippers, but they'd collapse late and the Clippers would steal that. Then they'd have another one in LA, this one against the Lakers, but a dreadful second half would lead to them getting blown out. They're just missing LaMelo Ball, straight up. Terry Rozier and Miles Bridges are doing their best to carry the load, but a lot of nights they just seem to lack that firepower. PJ Washington has popped up for a big night here and there. Same with Gordon Hayward and rookie Brandon Miller even. But Bryce McGowan's he's popped up out of nowhere really. He's done pretty well for them of late, but I think they just need LaMelo really. From there, who knows? But they need him back, and maybe Mark Williams too, since he had that back injury. He's like really good center there to solidify the middle. Like, he can jump out of the gym, but hopefully that back injury is nothing serious. Nick Richards does all right, but I think you need both of them working in tandem, switching them up for each other. That's a pretty good one too. But next, our last team in the Eastern Conference, the Washington Wizards. They went 1-3 this past week. Going into Portland, had a huge lead and almost blew it before holding on for the 1-point win. They'd follow that up by losing the next 3 in a row. They'd go in the Bay Area and lose to the Warriors. They'd return home and lose a close one to the Magic before getting blown out by the Raptors. This team has some offensive firepower, can stay in games when they're hot, but they are the worst defensive team in the league by rating. So playing like that, it's going to be hard to win games. Poole needs the ball to put up his numbers, but maybe we can get Tyus Jones the ball a little more. It seems when the ball's in his hands, you're not turning it over as much. More people are involved. I don't know, but the Poole effect, you got to stay with the Poole effect. I don't know. I say less Poole, more Tyus. But despite the losses piling up, you can't blame Kyle Kuzma all the time. He's having a pretty good season. 22.5 points per game, 6 boards, and 4.5 assists. I mean, I think the best remedy for this team, obviously, is better defense, but maybe more Tyus Jones, a little less Jordan Poole. I don't know. That's it for the East. We go to the West, starting in the Northwest with the best team in the Western Conference. Still, the Minnesota Timberwolves. They went 3-1 this past week. Hosted the Lakers and beat them. Then they'd go on the road and beat up on the Sacramento Kings. Then on Boxing Day, they'd go in the OKC and get pummeled by the Thunder. Then they'd host a Luka-less Mavs team, and they won behind a huge Anthony Edwards night. This team's legit. 30 games into the season, you can't call them a fluke anymore. This team's best defensive team in the NBA by rating, and they just wear you down. It took some time, but this team knows how to play with Rudy Gobert now, and it's scary. Plus, Anthony Edwards, he's the type of alpha dog you want leading your team. And if this team is still number one in the West by the end of the year, more MVP votes for Anthony Edwards. Cat's looking freer than ever. That cat can fly now. The front court of Cat, Gobert, and Naz Reid off the bench. Probably the best front court in the NBA, right? That's pretty solid. Next up in the division, the defending champs, the Denver Nuggets. They sit second in the West. Went 4-0 this past week, and they're up to 6 in a row now. They'd win a close one on the road against the Nets for going into Charlotte and beating the Hornets. They'd return and win a close one against the Warriors, and then they'd host the hot Grizzlies team, except Ja Morant was sick. He didn't play, so the Nuggets are like, all right, we'll just beat you by almost 40. So don't sleep on the Nuggets. They have a legitimate chance to repeat as champions. Jokic is looking like he might want another MVP trophy for the case. Team has worked Jamal Murray in since he's come back from injury a bit ago, and they're clicking, flexing depth a bit, which is even more important now since it was announced Aaron Gordon suffered some lacerations to his face and hand resulting from a dog bite. So he'll be away from the Nuggets while he recovers, and it said the injury will require 21 stitches and take some time to heal. So that does not sound good. Peyton Watson, he looked really good jumping into the starting lineup there the last game, so we'll see what the Nuggets can continue to do without Aaron Gordon in the lineup. And hopefully he heals up quick. I don't know whose dog was it. Hopefully it wasn't Luka's or something trying to take him down in the standing. Next team up in the division is also next up in the conference. Yeah, the top 3 teams in the Western Conference all are out of the Northwest. Oklahoma City Thunder, they've been right there, and they went 3-1 this past week, beaten down on the Clippers, who were coming hot after winning 9 in a row. Then they'd host the Lakers and lose to a team that was hungry for a win. LeBron went off that night. And then the Thunder would surprisingly, like I say, crush the Wolves, and then they'd have a highly touted matchup with 2 of the best teams in the league. You'd have a rematch of Canada-USA with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Anthony Edwards, so it was surprising to see it so one-sided. Then the Thunder would beat the Knicks, and this is just wild. The second youngest team in the league looks like a legit playoff threat, SGA, he still does everything. He needs to be talked about as MVP, potentially. Jalen, J-Dub Williams, he's the legit second scorer. I've mentioned other teams. There's questions on who's that guy. No questions here. He's legit. He's the real deal. Chet Holmgren, he's continuing to do his thing. I think leading the Rookie of the Year race. This team just has so many good weapons, good individual defenders, and their defense is good too. They're they're ranked 6th defensively in the league with defensive rating, and you do not want to face this team in a playoff series. It took me a while to get through that, just talking so much Thunder. They're good. You can't sleep on the Thunder anymore. Next up, you got the Utah Jazz. They went 3-1 this past week. Yeah, they were missing tons of players in that win against the Pistons I mentioned in that sad Pistons story. And they'd get those guys back, Lauri Markkanen and Jordan Clarkson. They returned against the Raptors where they'd come back and steal that win. Then they travel from Toronto down to San Antonio and they'd beat down on my Spurs for their third win in the row. But then they'd be brought back to earth a bit in New Orleans when the Pelicans would get their revenge and finally beat the Jazz. The Jazz had beaten them twice earlier in the season. But you know what? This Jazz team's looking pretty good when they got all their pieces in place, right? Lauri Markkanen, he's an all-star in this league. Colin Sexton, he's fought his way into that starting lineup. He's not letting go. People say that this guy's got that dog in him. It's Colin Sexton. Like, this guy, his hustle is insane. So you're not taking him out of the starting lineup. So that means Jordan Clarkson, you're going to have to come in off the bench. And he did it. And it looked good the other night. Like, this is reminiscent of 2020-21 where he won Sixth Man of the Year award. I know, you want to start, but Hardy's got to do what's best for the team and bring Clarkson off the bench. Watch out for the Jazz. They're going to make a little run here, I think. Wrapping up the Northwest, we go to Oregon on the Portland Trail for the Trail Blazers. Blazers went 1-3 this week. They'd almost come back to beat the Wizards after being down big, but they'd come up short. Get blown out on the road by the Warriors before returning home and thumping the Kings. Yeah. Then they'd go down 31-8 in the first quarter against the Spurs, and you're not going to recover from that. They tried, but they weren't coming back. Anthony Simons looks like a legit scorer in the league. He can score on anyone. It's kind of been a bummer that Canadian Shaden Sharp's missed some time with an adductor strain. Hopefully he can come back soon. That 1-2 punch was fun to watch. They've also been missing DeAndre Ayton, who's missed some time with a knee injury. The vets are still doing their thing. Jeremy Grant, Malcolm Brogdon, and Scoot Henderson, number 3 overall pick's been looking good of late. He put up some decent numbers last game. Just don't look at that shooting percentage for that night. Pretty bad. But this team, it's like a few I've mentioned earlier. You don't know what you're going to get. They can drop an egg or they're going to push you to a tough game. So we'll leave the Northwest and we'll go to the Pacific. The LA Clippers were leading the division after they had that 9-game winning streak. They'd go 1-2 this past week from it, losing 2 straight after that streak and then bouncing back with a win. They were blown out by the Thunder and then even worse by the Celtics the next game by 37 points. Then they need a big comeback to come back to beat the Hornets. So this winning streak kind of ended around the same time Kawhi Leonard picked up his injury. He's nursing a hip contusion and he's missed the last few games. But Coach Ty Lue said he is progressing each day. But James Harden, he's fit in there, He's fit in more with the team. He's setting people up. He's putting up big numbers. He and Paul George seem to be trying to hold the fort down while Kawhi's out. But this is like I said with the Sixers. There's 2 teams. There's with and without. There's the Clippers with Kawhi. I think they could win a title. And there's the Clippers without Kawhi. They're coming up short. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully he can come back and be healthy. Next up in the Pacific, the Sacramento Kings. They go 1-2 this past week, winning big over the Suns. The very next night, they'd host the Timberwolves and lose that one. I mean, the Kings have had some tough back-to-back games here. That second night's always a doozy, and they usually get crushed. Then the Kings, they go into Portland, get blown out by the Blazers, and then that last game against the Blazers, it was a weird one. You'd have De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis showing up, putting up huge numbers, but that's it. The box score is like tumbleweed. It's just floating. There's nothing else there. It's very weird because this team's got more depth than that. Kevin Huerter, he really needs to step it up. He's kind of had a tough year. But maybe this 2-game skid just because of Christmas. But I don't know. They got to bounce back from this. Defensively, they're 21st by rating in the league, and that's not very good. That'll show its face in the playoffs. Fox is still the best players in the league. One of my favorites to watch. So I'm not doubting this team. I'm just blaming Christmas. Maybe we'll see what happens. But we'll go back to LA real quick again. This time to talk Lakers. They went 2-2 this past week, losing to Minnesota, but bouncing back to win that big one against Oklahoma City. And then that one they ended a 4-game losing streak. And I mentioned LeBron went nuts. Yeah, he went bananas a bit. 40 points, 7 boards, 7 dimes. Yeah, it's 21st season. And then they'd follow that with a tough loss to the Celtics on Christmas Day. But then they'd get a Christmas present in the shape of the Charlotte Hornets, and the Lakers would use a massive second half to take that win. And this Lakers team still has potential to end up in the finals, like I predicted to take on the Bucks. Anthony Davis has been playing phenomenal. He just needs to stay healthy like he has been, knock on wood. I don't want to jinx a guy in his 21st season, but how much longer can LeBron keep doing this? Like, he'll give you that huge game like he did in the Thunder, but someone's got to come in and help him in the next night. AD played good against the Celtics, but who else is going to come up and help Braun? Like, Vanderbilt's awesome defensively, but he's limited offensively. Hachimura, Reeves, or Russell, they got to step up and take that consistent third role. They're all hovering around a similar scoring. Like, Reeves and Russell currently have the exact same points per game, but Yeah, they got to switch something up. It seemed like Darvin Ham did that last game against the Hornets. He pulled out Cam Reddish and started Rui. Maybe that's what you got to do going forward. Reddish played pretty good earlier this season, but by having Vanderbilt in the lineup, maybe you can pull Reddish out and go with Rui or Russell or Reeves. I like the Rui move. I think he's a good switch in there, and this might be the spark that they need to go on a little run. I could see it, you know. I like Rui. I think maybe giving him some more time should help. We'll see, especially with that mask he's rocking right now. But we'll go from the Hollywood to the desert. Phoenix Suns went 1-2 this past week. They'd get beaten up on by the Kings, and they'd host the Mavs on Christmas. And Luka did what Luka does to the Suns, dropping a 50 on them. They'd bounce back and end their 3-game losing streak with a tough win over Houston. But this team's struggling more than we thought they would at this point of the season, you know? There have been discussions that KD's frustrated with the injuries. I mean, that's tough, but and the lack of production from some of the others, as Shaq would call them. I wouldn't put Grayson Allen there. He's been playing pretty good as well. But some of the others, you know, they're underperforming a bit here. But some of this could all get remedied as Bradley Beal may return tonight, the night this podcast comes out, or even against the Magic on Saturday. But that'll help big. And it'd be nice to see this big three together. You know, there was all so much hype behind it, but they've barely been on the floor. Let's see them together. Eric Gordon had a very weird game against the Kings when they got beaten down there. He had 0 points, which is ridiculous. He's bounced back since then, but I don't think we need to panic yet. Let's just see what this big three can do, and let's see how they grow together, because they need time to get some chemistry. This team's currently sitting in that last play-in spot, and like I said, this is not where Kevin Durant expected to be at this point in the season. Wrapping up the Pacific, we go to the Golden State Warriors. The Warriors went 2-2 this past week. They take care of the Wizards, and Jordan Peele, oh shit, not Jordan Peele. Jordan Poole's return to the Bay Area. Lucky for him, Draymond Green is still suspended and wasn't at the game. The Warriors would follow that up with a win over the Trailblazers, and they go in Denver on Christmas Day, and the match between the last two NBA champs, and the Nuggets took that. Curry had 18 in that Christmas Day loss, and maybe kind of check the numbers here. Curry scored over 20 just once in his 10 Christmas Day games. He scored 33 back in 2021 against the Suns, but other than that, it's kind of been stinkfest. He averages 15.8 points per game on 31.7% shooting. Yeah, those are not regular Steph Curry numbers. I don't know if he hates Christmas, he's distracted, he's a big Grinch fan, I don't know. But the Warriors would follow that up by hosting the Heat and losing. It was an ugly game. 8 players in double figures sounds good. When your two leading scorers are Curry and Clay with 13 apiece, that's a yikes. This 2-game losing streak has looked pretty bad, and it's not looking any easier. The next 3 games, Mavericks, Magic, Nuggets. So yeah, this 2-game losing streak could come 5 and no problem. That wasn't a good one. In the shake of a kitten's whisker. There you go. That's a better one. But we'll go to the last division in the segment, the Southwest. The Mavs are leading their division, but their win-loss record has them 6th in the West. They went 2-3 this past week. Yeah, 5 games. They got blown out in Houston, but they'd return home and blow out the Spurs. Then on Christmas Day, Luka, like I said, he continued his ownership of the Sun. He dropped 50 points on them as a Christmas gift. They'd lead by 20 against the Cavs I mentioned to earlier before choking and losing. Then Luka would get some rest against the Timberwolves, and they dropped that one. This team goes as Luka goes, and even with his MVP-type numbers, it's been a struggle sometimes. The big thing is getting Kyrie Irving back. Still no timetable on the return of the superstar guard, but I guess his heel injury is progressing. But he needs to get back because they're just a way better team with him there. And these injuries could be affecting some hardware too, because Tim Hardaway's had to start a few games. If Tim Hardaway Jr. keeps starting games, that could hurt his chances of winning the Sixth Man of the Year award. But next up in the division, the New Orleans Pelicans. Pels went 2-2 this past week. They'd beat down on the Cavs before losing a close one at home to the Rockets. Then they'd lose another close one in overtime, the Jaw and the Grizzlies, who just has their number. And the Pelicans would finally beat the Jazz after the Jazz beat them twice in November, which I alluded to. And this team's playing well. Like, they had 2 losses there, but combined a few points, so they could have easily been 4-0 this past week. Willie Green still finding what lineups to go with dealing with injuries, but man, when Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson are rocking the pick and roll, it's pretty devastating. You know, someone's getting a vicious dunk, or someone's getting an open look, or one of the spot-up shooters is getting a look. And Trey Murphy, Man, Trey Murphy the third, I guess. He is dynamic from outside. I'm so glad he's healthy again. This Pelicans team, I'm just waiting for them to go on a big run here. The Rockets went 2-2 this past week. They started off well, beating down the Mavericks and winning a close game, as I mentioned earlier. Then they would drop back-to-back games at home, first to the Pacers and the Suns. But this team's still such a surprise. You know, the defensive stats are there. They're fourth in the league defensive rating. And let's get Alperen Sengun to the All-Star game, guys. He's leading this team, 20.9 points a game, 9 boards a night, 5 assists a night. This guy is becoming a Jokic right in front of our eyes here. Let's get him in the All-Star game. You know he's going to do fancy shit, too. Jabari Smith Jr., he stepped it up as of late, reminding us why he's worthy of that number 3 overall pick last year. Jalen Green, he's still second in scoring, even though he's been getting shuffled in and out of the starting lineup as Udoka tries to figure things here. That's going to be the tough thing. There's a lot of really good young players on here, and they all feel like they should get minutes. So that's the tough job of Ime Udoka, to develop this team, get people their time, and win games. That's the life, yo. Next up in the Southwest, Memphis Grizzlies. They've been one of the most exciting teams to watch as of late, and it's because Ja Morant is back, and he's leading the team the right way. They went 3-1 this past week. They beat the Pacers. They go in the ATL and beat the Hawks. They'd win that tough game in overtime over the Pelicans I just mentioned. Ja had a sick alley-oop in the extra frame there. And the Grizz also got Marcus Smart back from injury in that game against the Pelicans, so that'll be nice to have him back. He's been out for a while. Ja would miss that game against the Nuggets, which I mentioned earlier, due to illness, and yeah, they'd almost lose by 40. So it's very clear how important Ja Morant is to this Grizzlies team. It looked like a lost season, but with Ja back, this team could sneak into the play-in. There's enough spots. They could get up there. Desmond Bane's been balling out without Ja Morant, so he can have an increased role now with Ja there. And this team, they can sneak in, and you don't want to play them. The only thing, though, I've been calling out players. I called out RJ earlier. Gotta call out Jaren Jackson Jr., former Defensive Player of the Year. You can't be averaging 5.7 rebounds a game. Like, how many Defensive Players of the Year are averaging that? Even the guards are probably rebounding better than that. When Marcus Smart won it, or Gary Payton, like, come on, man. You're a big power forward / center in the league. You got rebound better than that. But we'll finish with the recaps of my San Antonio Spurs. We'll peep the jersey I'm wearing. Wembanyama. I wore it 2 podcasts in a row now. Got to. Good gift. Thanks again, babe. Spurs went 1-3 this past week. They lose in Chicago for going to Dallas and getting obliterated. Wembanyama didn't play in that Mavs game. He tweaked his ankle in warm-up and didn't get to play. So they return home, get pounded by the Jazz. Then they go up to Portland, where they really jump out on Portland, going up 31-8 in the first quarter. And they'd hold on to win. So anytime the Spurs are getting a win, that's big. We don't get a lot of them. There's another game in Portland tonight, so maybe we'll get one. Hopefully, because after that, play the Celtics, Grizzlies, and Bucks. So that'll be a tough go. We'll see if maybe that Wembanyama-Giannis matchup. We didn't see it last time. Wemby didn't play, but Wemby, he's putting up huge numbers here. He's leading the team in scoring, rebounding, and blocks. Team still struggles in games, though. Like Vassell shows us scoring, so does Keldon Johnson. But now it seems Coach Pop is using Keldon like a Ginobili role. He's bringing him off the bench now, which is weird because he's one of, if not the best scorer on the team right now. So seems like he's going with Malachi Branham at the point more. But, you know, whoever can get Wemby the ball really works for me. And I'm not going to question Pop, I guess. But this team, I guess they got to take their lumps before they can win. I still believe, like I said, Wemby jersey in the house. My house. But yeah, that's the recap of each team during our 9th version of this recap. How's your team looking? You excited? You worried? I'm enjoying the season so far. Other than that shit in Detroit, I hate to see the losing like that. Like I said, I usually kind of root for Toronto, but not on Saturday. Come on, Detroit. Detroit basketball. But we'll see. Starting to see some injuries. Hopefully the players can come back from that. But yeah, we'll see people start to separate in the league here. See who the real contenders and who the pretenders are. Talk some stats quick. Joel Embiid, he continues to lead the league in scoring at 35 a night. Luka, SGA, Giannis Antetokounmpo, De'Aaron Fox, and Kevin Durant, they're all averaging over 30 as well. So there's a few players there. Current rebounding leader, Nikola Jokic at 12.4. 3 other players averaging 12 rebounds or more, Anthony Davis, Domantas Sabonis, and Rudy Gobert. Assist leader, still Indiana's Tyrese Halliburton at 12.4 a night. Trae Young, the only other guy in double figures, averaging 11.3. Luka and Jokic are the only other players averaging over 9 assists a game. On the defensive end, rookie Victor Wembanyama leading the league in blocks at 3.2 per game. That's nuts. Just behind him, Brook Lopez at 2.9. But in that third spot, you got fellow rookie Chet Holmgren and Utah's Walker Kessler at 2.7. So a lot of big guys there. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander continues to lead the league in steals with 2.8. He's killing it. He's amazing offensively and defensively. Gotta love that. We talked individuals. Let's talk team rankings in this week's edition of the Rencity Top 5. There's been a few changes, except at the top. That's been consistent. Boston Celtics, still number 1. Number 2, the Minnesota Timberwolves. Number 3, the Denver Nuggets. Number 4, the OKC Thunder. Number 5, Milwaukee Bucks. So I'm keeping the team with the best record in the NBA at that number 1 spot. Celtics are atop the league and don't appear to be slowing down anytime soon. Timberwolves are still the best team in the Western Conference and do it on both sides of the floor. The only question with this team is how much can you trust an unproven team come playoff time. But we're talking regular season right now. But that third up, I have the defending champs Denver Nuggets. They're rocking that 6-game winning streak, and I almost had them ahead of the Timberwolves. The big difference right now, the Wolves still have that number 1 defense, while the Nuggets are in 8th, which is still pretty good. But that was my tiebreaker there. The Thunder, they take that 4th spot as they continue to look fucking amazing. Second youngest team in the league is not supposed to be this good. I love it. To round out the top 5, it was a tough one. It was either Bucks or 76ers, and because of that injury to Embiid, I kind of lean more Bucks, but either of them could be there, and I think that'd be cool. So yeah, what do you think of that? Do you have a better top 5? Holla at your boy. Now for that MVP discussion, I'm sticking to my guns. And the third week straight, I'm giving the nod to Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. He does it all. I was just saying what he does on the defensive end with his steals. He's on the 3rd seeded team in the tough West, and he's leading the 2nd youngest team, beating that dead horse in the league. So despite everything I said about him, it's a tight race. And any of the next few names I mentioned, they could have just a good... Excuse me, all this MVP talk get me crazy here. But any of these guys I'm just about to mention, they could very well be in this contention too. So in my ranking, I go by... So I have Shea Gilgeous, right? Then I have Giannis Antetokounmpo, Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, Jason Tatum, Anthony Edwards, and Luka Doncic. You can keep Kawhi's name in there too. I know he's missed all last week with that hip injury, so I guess you can have him in there. So I guess that's my MVP rankings from 1 to 8. Yeah, there's 8 guys I think I could win MVP this year. Who knows? We'll go Rookie of the Year. I think Chet Holmgren's still got a slight edge there. But he's like the numbers he's putting up are huge, and they're on a winning team, which is big. But Wembanyama's numbers are pretty good too. He's leading, like I said, leading the Spurs in points, rebounds, and leading the entire NBA in blocks per game. That impact's pretty hard to ignore too. So what would he do if you plugged him in on a playoff team, right? Because I guess the Thunder were a play-in team last year. They weren't a playoff team, but yeah. He's still got it instilled on that team. If you put Wemby on that team, would his numbers be just as good? So that's the debate going forward. And like I said with Miami and Yame Yakas Jr., if you took those 2 big guys out of it, he's getting it easy. But I think if he continues his play, big minutes, and we could have a 3-horse race. But I don't know. I still think Chet's a little ahead in that. But, well, I think that's it. Week 9. We're in the books. It's been exciting. We had some good shit. We had some bad shit, mostly in Detroit. But we'll see. Hopefully that history gets ended against Toronto in that game I alluded to earlier. And like I said, we have some injuries, some big guys, Embiid. Hopefully he can come back soon. Hopefully the guys can come back. Like, look at the Jazz. They're coming back, and they're starting to click. They look good. It's good to have your players back. Bradley Beal's coming back. Let's see what the Suns can do. Might have to put glasses on because the Suns might shine that bright. Or we might have to throw them out because they're going to stink. We'll see. We have to see, though, right? We have to see what these guys can do when they're out there. But we have the Christmas games in the past now. They're in our rearview mirror. We're looking ahead. People are going to start thinking, well, All-Star will be coming up next. But everyone's already got eyes on the playoffs, especially out west. It's so deep. You got to keep playing each night. Don't rest your players, Brooklyn Nets. And, yeah. Do what you got to do, guys. Thanks for coming out and enjoying the show. This is Rencity. Take care. Hold your follow through. Rencity out.